You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona. With me always are my good friends.
Jay back from surgery.
That's a good one.
Yay, that one works. And Shannon G and Mesa AZ, not in surgery.
There you go. Both of us are not in surgery. Welcome back to the Park Flyer Podcast. We appreciate your patronage, and give us a like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up if you can, and we appreciate you joining us again this week. Yes, we are glad, to have Jay back out of surgery. He survived.
We missed Jay.
Yeah, we did. He was unfortunately getting ready to see the doc, and so we welcome him back. He's still recovering, but he's not allowed to lift any heavy items, I don't think.
Doc said it would kill the lesser man, but
Yeah, well, there you go. You can lift your coffee mug, though.
Yeah,
so you got
I can
that
lift
going
my coffee mug and my fork, fortunately.
There you go.
Not going to start.
That's all that matters.
Oh, that's funny. Well, we are excited to have him back. He, fortunately, we were able to kind of hear about Holly Springs, the Wings Over Springs event. And unfortunately, he went to surgery right after that, so we didn't get to talk to him. But he's going to fill us in on a little bit, our kind of, the aftermath. And but before that, we have a couple announcements. We have a auction coming up for your club.
Yep.
And that's on the
Arizona Mall Aviators, November 1st, Saturday, 2 weeks from this, or a week from this Saturday, I should say.
Yeah, there you go.
Saturday.
And then the Jet Rally coming up as well.
Yep, November 20th through the 23rd. We are rip-roaring ready for that, and really looking excited. We're still looking for, so we have a lot of sponsors as far as like products and things for that. We're still looking for some sponsors for our awards. So if you're interested, if you want to sponsor an award, and it's not a lot of money. It just, just we have some plaques. We just kind of want,
Yeah, sure.
Somebody say, hey, we sponsored by. So
yeah, there we go. We might be able to sponsor an award.
There you go. There we go.
We could do that.
Cool.
So yeah, if you are in the Phoenix area, feel free to stop by both the auction and the Jet Rally. You can go register the Jet Rally on on
our club website.
AZMallAviators.com. And is it on AMA as well, or you've got a link on the AMA website that'll take you to?
I think we just have it listed. I don't know if there's a direct link on the AMA website, but if they put it, it's, I didn't do that part, but if James did, it's on there.
Yeah, no, I think I was on the AMA and looking at some events, and I think there is a link to something. It's either a link to your website or a link to the registration.
Hopefully, there probably is. Probably to the website. It's all the same.
I think. So that's all good. And then let's see what else. You kind of have a story for us. You bought some batteries online.
Yeah. So about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, I was on online looking around, and these batteries popped up by a company called LYW, and I did some research, and they're a legit company, and they were asking, offering pretty reasonable prices for different sizes, and I said, I'd probably use a couple extra 6S5000. So so I ordered them, and I got a tracking number, and it took a little while. They were coming from Asia, obviously, but they got here and arrived well packaged, and I kind of took a quick cursory look at them, and I wasn't going to use them right then, so I was okay, I'll put them in my battery storage area. So Saturday I go out to get ready to go fly, go charge some batteries. I pull these batteries out, and I'd ordered them with EC5s. So when you order batteries, traditionally when you order EC5s, what end is on the battery?
The female end.
Correct. What end do you think was on these batteries?
Male end.
Must be a male.
The male end. That's right. I was surprised.
That is a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. So they have a presence online, and I paid for it through PayPal. So I politely said, hey guys, I took some pictures. I go, here's your battery, and here's the connector, and here's the battery, and every other EC5 I own. Right. The industry standard for 40 years has been female on the battery side. Right. So I'm like, hey, and they kind of gave me the runaround at first, but and then they somebody realized, okay, I guess we made a mistake. I don't know how many batteries got sent out like that.
Yeah.
They kind of give the company line, oh, we support, it's applied to the drone industry. It's like, okay, the drone industry doesn't use different battery connectors than we do. It's the same.
No.
So that's a
Polar
load
opposites.
right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I had said, I'd requested, kind of a little compensation for it. I didn't want to return them.
Mhm.
That's a hassle. I'm like,
Yeah.
to cover me putting some connectors on it, I made an offer and then they made a counter offer. I'm like, okay, that's fair.
Sure.
So LYW, they stood up for, what they offered and provided me a reasonable outcome. So I just want to point that out.
Very nice.
I'm not bad mouthing them. I was just surprised, that they came that way. And I'm hoping, that no one else got them that way, or if they were going out that way for a while, that they're not now. So other people don't
It's a
deal
pretty
with
major, snafu.
Yeah, it is. I was really surprised. I've been buying batteries for, I don't know how long, and that's been the same. I think if I remember back in the day when you had remember the Tamiya cars, I think their batteries, I don't remember, they might have had females on the car side. I think it was it was a difference. They just did it differently.
Yeah.
But since modern times, it's been
So I have a similar story. Many years ago, I bought some batteries, a similar thing, and they came with the red. They're red connectors. They're not EC5s, but they're longer. They're like a tube connector.
It was the banana hobby. It was one male and one female.
Correct. It was one male and one female, and that's what I did, because I had one that had two, and I went to go stick them in there, and you want to make sure those are lined up. Because if they're not, you're going to get a bunch of sparkies.
Yeah, we don't like those.
So I actually had to buy adapters for them. So I put them together. I bought the adapter with the EC5 on the end, and then I heat shrink those two together so that they wouldn't come apart, because I didn't want to just cut them. And which, by the way, there's another safety tip that I will tell you. Not that I've done it myself, but don't cut both wires simultaneously. That's the big no-no.
That's a huge.
I have seen someone do that. Luckily, it was on a very small battery, so it was a little spark. But you do it on a 6-cell.
Yeah, don't do it with a guillotine either. It just doesn't work.
You may burn up pixels in your eyes. Hey.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, make sure you wear sunglasses and some gloves when you do it, because otherwise it'll be a sparky.
I think that happens quite a bit, dude.
It does, and I always make a joke that I've never done it, but that's not true. I did it one time just because I was standing there and I was like, "Oh, I got to change the batteries." And I went, and man,
just as you're slicing into the first one, that millisecond, you go, "Hey." Just spap.
Yeah.
Can't see out of that eye too well.
Well, the good news is, if it's a small battery, you can probably survive it, right? Get through there. The bad news is with a 6-cell or 5-cell, which I did it on 5-cell. Once that touches, it's instantly welds it together. So now I've got it's sparking, but it's starting to glow now, because that battery's going, and I'm trying to wiggle it off of there. So, I luckily got it out before it totally sealed it. But that's a pretty good welding torch when you put both those 5 and 6 cells together. So, well, that's good. Good story. Oh my gosh, moral of the story is check your battery ends before you try to stick them together, though, right?
And whenever you get batteries online, make sure that they have the right connector.
Yeah, that's true. So
if they had no connector, obviously you put on your own, but it's just like you expect the right ones to be put on when they advertise them.
Yeah. Well, that's one of those things that they do that just from a safety standpoint, which is funny, because an EC. In my head, while we're talking about this, if you had 2 open holes and you stuck something in it, like both of them in there, you could create a current. Or if you had, the poles on the inside, it's different, I guess. It's the same. I don't know. But it's almost always the female
surface area. So you've got the big, they got the open space, to have something that's going to, maybe momentarily, I don't think it would. It would
probably not
stick. I don't think it would be. It probably whatever.
Yeah, it would be really hard to do that with those particular.
Yeah, it's challenging.
Deans, on the other hand, Dean's connectors.
Yeah, Dean's connectors. I've seen that happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the other good thing too is that the EC fives and the IC fives do connect together. You can connect the.
Yeah, because
together.
actually, when I replace these connectors, it'll be IC5s because
Yeah.
Horizon doesn't sell the EC5s anymore. They only sell the IC5s.
Right.
So you just don't use the middle wire thing. But I like it because they're more like XT90s where you've got the back shroud. You put down the wire first and then just you solder them directly. Because I was never a huge fan of, depending upon where you bought your EC5s, how they go into the actual plastic. Some was through the back, or some was through the top, and you pull them down through. And it was always, and you never knew, unless you bought them from Horizon, they were always, you push into the back and they'd snap.
Right.
But almost everybody else, it was the other way around. You had to pull them through, and that was never, it's one of those things that was never really talked about. It's just you had to figure it out on your own. So
yeah, it's true. Well, it's good that you didn't burn the place down, or you were able to catch that.
Yeah, well, I couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't even. I couldn't burn the place down because, because it was like I don't.
Yeah. Hey,
I mean, I probably have an adapter somewhere, from a male to female EC5, but it's like that's not the point. I'm not gonna bring that out.
Yeah, no sense in changing all of that.
So Shannon, when you go to change those plugs out, make sure that I don't know how you do it, but just because since we're talking safety, one of the big things that I do, especially when you're going from a battery and you're putting new leads on or something, I only work on one pole at a time.
Yep, that's rule number one.
Rotate it around, get it out of the way, strip the wire off, get my new connector, solder it on, put on the shrink wrap stuff on it.
Yeah.
Then I snip the other one, because in my younger days I would just snip, go about work my thing, strip off the wire, put them down,
Yeah.
Chasing it around the room.
I am well aware of that.
Yeah. So yeah.
Too many times our wives are like, "What's that smell?" Nothing, honey. Nothing to see here. What are you cooking in there?
Are you smoking? There's no smoking
fingers.
Here.
I'm cooking my batteries.
There's a blue haze across the room. What are you talking about?
A blue haze. Yeah, it's like, what is this, a nightclub? What are you doing in here? Oh, that's too funny.
So, and not that we condone this by any means, but did you ever go to one of the night flies at Gilbert Quiet Flyers?
I think maybe we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a year.
Do you remember what Rick Disler liked to do with his old?
Oh. Yeah. I did go to one of those.
Okay.
Never mind.
Yep. I said we're not condoning that activity, but it was fun to witness once or twice. But
that's true too. Yep. So,
but no,
imagine what we can do with sparks, flames, and sparklers.
Yeah. Very colorful. Very colorful.
Well, we would like to congratulate Jay on getting out to Holly Springs, and he and AK Mike went up there, as you probably heard from our last episode. They were able to kind of meet up with Doug and some of the guys and have some dinner afterwards, kind of talk of the event. And of course, I was able to talk to Jay before he went into surgery right after the event, and see him and Mike and see how things were going. So I kind of had a heads up before we got the podcast audio for it. And then Jay had me rolling in the floor laughing because of the after party, so to speak, before they went to dinner to go talk to everything. Jay was able to lend a helping hand to an individual. And not that we're, saying anything against the individual. It's always great. Let me preface this because, you could be listening, but it's always great to have new people in the sport. Right. We always welcome anyone that comes in. However, it is pretty common, especially nowadays, of people to, buy toys from the store or from Amazon. They do have them set up to where the general public can fly them and, kind of go do their thing. And they're, as I always say, in the real aircraft side of it, because I do instruction and some stuff there too, luck breeds confidence. That's usually what, if somebody comes around and, any of my students or anybody that I fly with aerobatics or even in the RC field, that's always what they'll say. Oh yeah, go talk to Mike. Luck breeds confidence. We know that. And it's, not derogatory, but it just means that, I got lucky. I did a good job this time, or I got lucky and got a good airplane that had a, gyro or whatever. And then now it gives me that confidence to think that I can jump 2 or 3 or 4 levels where I really shouldn't be. There is a progression. Someone that just started flying today, I can tell you that on Amazon, it's great. They've got little toys. I think, it wasn't Jay, but I think AK Mike at one of the electric festivals, somebody came in while we were packing up and brought some of those little ones.
Yeah.
And of course I went out there and flew them and got them all trimmed up. They're fun to fly. They're easy to fly. Pretty much anybody that buys them off Amazon can just take off out of the driveway and do it. But it does give you a false sense of, hey, if I can fly this small one, I can fly this big one. And we've had the entire time. I remember a story at the Gilbert Quiet Flyers before we jump into Jay's deal, where a guy showed up and he had just come from the hobby store with one of those strikers. And you know as well as I do that thing is 130 mile an hour, right out of the box. And when you launch it, if you launch it at full throttle, it is gone. It's gone. I mean, that thing. And where we were flying at the Gilbert Quiet Fires was a really small field that had neighborhoods on both sides of us. And this guy came in and said, hey, I want to fly this. And I'm like, wow, this is a big striker. This is a fast airplane. You've flown before, right? Nope. This is my first airplane. I go, well, maybe you shouldn't fly this. Oh, no, I'm flying this. I can do it. I'm really good at it. I flew a paper airplane at my house. And then next thing you know, somebody launches it and that thing went it was gone 30 seconds after it launched that you couldn't even see it. I mean, he just didn't know what to do. Now, luckily for us, somebody brought it back to us about 3 weeks later. They were like, hey, this was in my pool equipment, and they lived 5 neighborhoods over. So wow. It eventually, just kind of, went down, but great airplane, but just not something that you should start with as your very first airplane. Right. And we all have been through there, but when you go to the hobby store, you watch these videos online, then a lot of times you look at it and go, wow, I could really do this. And you get that emboldenment, I want to fly turbines. I want to fly that airplane. Right. And not saying you can't, you just got to get some instruction, and you may spend a little bit more money than most people, trying to learn, because you're going to screw some stuff up. So having said all that, we are all familiar with it. We're not dogging on anybody for trying it out, but it is kind of, one of those situations where, as an older group of very seasoned pilots in the RC world, sometimes you kind of scratch your head and just go, at some point it's on you. So anyway, Jay, having said all that, you were able to kind of stay after and help someone find a new hobby.
Yeah. So
Nice.
it was one of those things. We were with Doug, and we went over from the big field that they have the event at, which is not their normal field. So I finally got a chance to go over and see their field that they fly at. And while we were there, there was a guy and his girlfriend, and they're over there and about to launch a plane or something. And Doug was talking to him, and then so Mike and I are sitting there and we're just chatting. And then Doug is getting ready to leave because he had some stuff to do later that evening before we met up for dinner. And as we were getting out of the car, Doug, calls us over and he's like, hey, can you guys go help that guy? And we're like, oh, why? What, what's he need? And he goes, well, he has a, F-22 over there. And I think it's his second plane, and I go, oh, okay. It's
big jump.
That's a big jump from his first plane to his second plane's an F-22. And he's like, yeah. And he's going to attempt to fly it in the field here. And I'm talking, it's definitely one of those free wing, it's not a small F-22. It's a, semi big.
It's like a 65 millimeter or maybe a 90 millimeter.
Yeah, it might have been a 70. It might have been a 70.
Okay. Yeah, they've got a 70 now.
They've got a 70 now too.
Because they have a 70, 80, and 90 in that.
That's correct. They do.
And a 64.
I would definitely say.
Did it have retracts?
Yes,
it did have retracts.
Okay, so it's probably the 70. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're so as I'm talking to Doug, Mike has moved over and he's talking to the guy. And before we know it, Mike's like, well, why don't you just taxi it down the field here just to get the feel of it? And I'm like, what's he doing? And then so the guy throttles the plane up and you see it ripping across the field, but the grass is too high. And it just slows down in the grass. And Mike's like, yeah, see, you barely got across, you went 3/4 of the way across the field and it's slowed down. So this grass is too high and you're not going to be able to take off. And then I hear the guy, saying something like, well, I could probably just, throw the plane. And Mike's like, yeah, that's not going to work.
No.
The guy goes, I don't see why not. And Mike's like, yeah, no, just go over to the field that has shorter grass. It's a bigger field. It'll help you out, blah, blah, blah. So Mike convinces the guy to go over to the bigger field. So we jump back in the car because, we had nothing to do for a couple of hours before we met up for dinner. So we jump in the car, we drive over to the field, and we start talking to the guy. And I'm talking to him about the other planes that he's flown. And he mentions that, oh, I got 1 or 2 of these planes off of Amazon. And, I mastered that in quick succession. And I'm feeling pretty confident. And I saw this. I was at the hobby store and I saw this and da-da-da-da-da. So I bought it and it has a gyro in it, just like my other plane did. And all this stuff. And he was explaining all his gear and everything. And he was knowledgeable of his radio. He was knowledgeable of the gear and programming it and how easy it was to program on his phone. And we went over all that stuff. And I said, well, depending on the hobby store, sometimes those guys can be a little, unscrupulous, I guess, or, they're not.
Be a little aggressive. Hey, this is what you need.
This is what you need, right? Just give me $1,000 and I'll give you everything you need to go fly for 10 seconds. So anyway, I'm sitting there talking to the guy about it. And so anyway, so I said, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, you just met the club president of that field over there. Why don't you go talk to those guys and come back on another day? And I'm sure they'll be more than gladly enough to help you fly the plane, get it trimmed out, do all this stuff. And the guy goes, nope, I did pretty good on the other thing. It's a perfect day. Nobody's here. I'm going to fly this today. And I said, okay, I'm just going to tell you, your chances are going to be a little low. And he goes, well, I kind of suspected I was probably going to crash it anyway. And I go, yeah, that's a lot of money just to, be so
a good mindset to have.
Yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, but it's got this great gyro. Everybody raves about it. And this is going to work out, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, well, let's set you up for success. So, I get him to get to the far edge of the field, so that he can fly into the wind. And I said, well, let's do another run up to see what's going to happen, and how much of the field you need. So he runs the plane up, and once again, he gets off the runway, and the grass is just too thick, and it slows the plane down, and it doesn't take off. And I said, okay, well, you're going to have to take off down the runway. And he goes, okay. So I said, so you're going to be flying in a little bit of a crosswind to take off. That shouldn't affect you too much, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, as we're talking through this stuff, I asked him, hey, I said, do you have a timer on your radio? And he goes, yeah. And I said, did you happen to set up your timer, to know how much time you're going to fly the plane? And he goes, yeah, I have 6 minutes in here. And I go, yeah, no, you need to have that. You're not going to last 6 minutes. And he's like, well, I'm not going to fly it full throttle. And I go, okay, see, this is one of those things you don't know because you don't know. I said,
right.
EDF jets are battery hogs. They're just gonna suck your battery dry. Where a prop plane you can fly for a long time, but EDFs just suck up the juice. And he's like, oh, okay. And he said, 3 minutes? And I said, yeah, so that's really not a lot of time. I mean, 5 minutes doesn't seem that long depending on what you're doing. 3 minutes is really short. And I said, and in that 3 minutes, we're going to fly around the pattern, trim the plane out. Then we're going to spend the rest of our time lining ourselves up to make a pattern, come back and land on the runway.
Right.
So it's like a minute up, we trim the plane out, and then for your last 2 minutes, it's practicing a landing, trying to practice a landing or two. And he's like, oh, okay. And I said, and, we're going to take off and we're going to fly counterclockwise around the field because of the way the wind's coming, so you're going to take off and turn left. He's like, okay, got it. All right. So as we're talking about this stuff, and so once again, I'm going through the whole procedure for taking off, what we're going to do, in that first phase of taking off. So we back up all the way up in the field. He roars the plane down. He zipping straight down the field, and the plane lifts off. Kind of did a hop, one of those things that popped up into the air, and I'm like, okay, go for it. And then he's just sliding straight down the field. And if you remember that field, there's 80-foot trees. 80 to 100-foot trees right at the end of the runway. And I'm like, okay, start turning left. And Mike's go, and you hear Barcelou over in the corner, left. It starts getting higher pitch and going left. And I'm like, okay, turn left. We're turning left. And finally the guy turns, but he doesn't do a nice gentle bank to the left. It's like, like a combat left turn, the plane turns left, and I'm like, whoa, okay. So now the plane starts getting on step and it's starting to go really, really fast. And I'm like, okay, you can start slowing down. You can go to 3/4 throttle, and the plane's going around and next thing we're already, we've already lapped the field once. And I'm like, okay, you can start slowing down. And then Mike's like, slow down. You can slow down. So here's somebody echoing.
He got Mike in the peanut gallery back there.
So he's echoing everything that I'm saying. Now, so the guy finally slows the jet down a little bit. And I'm like, okay, that speed's fine. Keep it right there. But every time he had to make a turn, he would speed the plane back up. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know why you're going faster. Just slow down, keep at that speed. So we're going counterclockwise. We make, he lasted way longer than we thought he was going to last. We thought he'd make, maybe one lap and ball it up. But he actually makes 2 or 3 laps. He's maintaining an altitude, and he seems to be doing okay. And let's see what happened after that. Okay, so anyway, his girlfriend goes, 2 minutes. And I'm like, oh, great.
She's keeping time.
Because the whole time that I had been talking to him and telling him things to do, like she had been taking notes. She was wonderful. Right. So she's like, 2 minutes. And I go, oh, okay. All right. So I said, 2 minutes already. And the guy's like, 2 minutes. And I'm like, okay, so now we need to start setting you up to bring you down in altitude and setting you up for landing on the runway. And the guy's like, okay. And so the next thing is it was like half a second later, he goes to make a turn, and the next thing I know, the plane's heading towards us. And I'm like, hey man, whatever you do, don't fly toward, it was kind of like in the pre-thing, don't fly towards us and don't fly over our heads and keep it out of the sun. Yeah. Now the sun we're standing, so the sun's behind us, and so the next thing I know, he flies right over the top of us, so we can't see the plane, and he crosses the edge of the field. There's a bunch of trees. He flies over the trees, and the plane descends right behind the trees, because they're so hot. Right behind it, and the sun's over there, right? And we're like, oh. And he's like, oh, man, I can't see it. It went behind the trees. And I said, okay, don't panic. I go, give it full throttle and gently pull back on the stick. He listened to me that time. And so the plane you see at the edge of the field, the thing pulls out above the trees, and I'm like, okay, continue, get back in the pattern, and let's get set up for trying to make a landing. The next thing I know, he turns the plane around 180 degrees and he starts flying clockwise. And I'm like, why did you do that? Why all of a sudden are you flying in the opposite direction? We've been practicing flying counterclockwise. Now you're flying clockwise. I said, turn around, turn the plane around and go get back in the pattern and fly clockwise. And he's like, the plane won't turn. It's not turning. And I'm like, it's not turning? And he's like, no. And so it's one of those things like, I'm half in between. Do I grab the remote from him and just, fly the plane or whatever? Or, hey, he's committed. Let him do his thing. So I just figured I didn't think he'd respond well because we gave him, some hints, let us fly the plane, trim it out for
Right.
you,
Right.
check it out, and then you can go back with the club and have them help you fly this thing. And he wasn't too receptive to that. But anyway, so he attempts to try to turn the plane around, and that wasn't, it didn't seem like he could turn the plane around. And I'm like, hey, get the plane turned around so we can, land into the wind and everything. And so the next thing I know, here comes the plane. Now he's lining up with the runway, and he's coming like right at us. And I'm like, and it's like, it's not kind of like he's descending, and like he's going to try to land it right there, landing downwind. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, hey, go ahead and take it around again, take it around the field again, so you can turn yourself around. And he comes down, and he's hauling the ass. As he's coming down, and I'm like, that's way too fast. That's too steep. That's too steep of an angle. Let's take it back around. And he's like, oh, and finally at the last second, as we're diving out of the way, everybody's kind of scattering. He comes down between, amongst us, just saves it and pulls out again, back up into the air. And I'm like, ooh, man. All right. And I'm like, okay, man, turn around and go counterclockwise, and you're going to have to land it. And he's like, it won't turn. As he's saying that stuff. And the next thing I know, he's flying, he's flying clockwise again. And the plane's low. It's low. And I'm just like, okay, well, keep it inside the field, because he had a tendency to fly way outside the field. He couldn't hold the pattern.
Right.
So anyway, as he's climbing to try to get out, he's like, it's not responding, and I'm like, yeah, you said that. And he's like, no, I don't have as much thrust as I did before. I think the battery, he's like, I think the battery's dying. And I'm like, okay, just calm down, just try to make a circuit, and, we'll deal with that. If you get some altitude, we can still deal with that. So anyway, how can I say it? When he would go into a turn, he wouldn't do a nice, gentle bank and climb. Yeah. He was always doing those combat, yank 90 degrees type turns.
Yeah.
So as he's trying to turn and he's, he's trying to keep it, inside the field or whatever, he's like even with the trees as he makes this turn. So the plane's skidding in the air. And it looks like he's just about to make it, and then he hits the top of the trees. Whap! It just makes this perfect flat whap sound. And I'm like, cut your throttle. And he cuts the throttle. And we just look up, and it hit the top of the trees.
Oh, right? Yeah.
So we start walking over there, and I'm like, well, I go, it looks like it's whole, for the most part. And he's like, where is it? And I go, at the tippy top of that tree, and finally everybody sees it. And he walks over to underneath the tree, and he's like, oh, well, that's it, whatever. And I go, where are you going? And he's like, well, it's at the top of the tree. I might as well, get in the car and go. And I'm just like, no, man, don't you want to get your plane out of the tree? And he's like, yeah, but how am I going to get it out? I have no idea. So I started naming off different ways you can get it down. Well, you can get a big pole. You can get a fishing rod with some weights on it. And he's like, fishing pole? He goes, what am I going to do with the fishing pole? And I'm like, okay, you get your fishing pole, you tie some, you put 50-pound test in it, blah, 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 blah. You get some weights, you cast it up there until you hit the thing, snag it, and you can pull it down. And then we tried earlier in the day. Somebody else had one of the E-Flight plane, not the E-Flight. Yeah, the Horizon Hobbies plane that I won at the festival. Guy had one of those
the
earlier.
Viper.
And they were flying it around, and then they lost contact with it and it went flying off. And it just went flying off. And we're like, and I was like, well, the gyro works real well, so it'll land flat. And so they found it at the other field. In a tree. It didn't make it to the ground. It was in a tree, but it landed flat in the tree. And they were like, how are we going to get it down? So the guy retracted the landing gear, and it fell out of the tree. and they were able to get it back. So we're like, okay, retract the gear. You can hear the gear working. And I'm like, nope, you're hung up on your wings, whatever. So I'm like, yeah, so go get a kid's fishing pole, get some weights, try casting it, whatever. And the guy goes, I've never fished a day in my life. And I go, okay. I go, okay, but it's a skill, you can learn the skill in a half an hour. You have some time tomorrow. I'm sure you can get it down. So anyway, as we're sitting there talking, I said, you wouldn't have happened to put your name in that plane, would you? And he goes, why? And I go, well, if it blows out of the tree, I said, the park here is really good about giving all the planes they fly to Doug, the president of the club, and he'll get it back to you. And he's like, yeah, no, I didn't put my name in the plane. And I'm like, okay. I said, don't feel too bad. I'm guilty of that myself,
Yeah,
so,
aren't we all?
So anyway, he's all down and everything. And he's like, yeah, I just don't see how I'm going to get this thing down. And I'm like, okay, so you don't like my fishing pole idea. You don't like the pole idea. I go, well, if it was me, I go, there's the fire department like several blocks down. Why don't you walk over there? Because it's Saturday evening or early evening. I go, you can knock on the door and say, hey, how would you guys like to get some cat training? He goes, cat training.
Some tomcat training.
Tomcat training. And just sheepishly tell them you put your RC plane up in the tree, and if they would go and retrieve it. And he goes, oh, I couldn't do that. And I go, why not? It's too embarrassing. And I go, dude, if you're going to be in this hobby, you need to let that go. I said, I've dealt with more trees in people's, on top of their houses, in their front yards, in their pools. I go, you got to suck it up and go, hey, my plane landed in your backyard. Can I retrieve it? And most people are just kind of cool about it. So anyway, he's like, oh no, man, that's too embarrassing. And I go, well, I mean, it's worth a try. Those guys would probably get it, if not tonight, maybe tomorrow or early in the morning, they'd come and get it out. And he goes, well, no, that's just too embarrassing. And I'm like, okay. So anyway, we walk over, I find the actual tree that leads to where his plane is. And I said, well, that's the tree, and he goes, ooh, I could probably climb that. And I go, I'm going to tell you, you're going to need a ladder just to get to where the limbs get out to where you can start climbing. You need a ladder for that. And he goes, I don't have
these are like pine trees too, right? So it's
no, they were actually like a hardwood. They were a hardwood tree,
were they?
but that are around there. But yeah, there are a lot of pines in there too. But they were in just regular hardwood type trees. So anyway, he's like, I'm like, well, just get a ladder. And he goes, and I said, and he goes, where am I going to get a ladder? And I go, dude, do you have friends? And he's like, well, yeah. And I go,
none of us do.
Out of all your friends, doesn't somebody or something like your dad or somebody in your family have a ladder? He goes, everybody I know lives in apartments. What do we have? Nobody has a ladder. And I'm just like, well, it doesn't hurt to ask. It's just one of those things. And I said, well, you can go buy a ladder, take it back, or you can go to one of those rental places and rent a ladder. And if you want, they probably have one of those cherry pickers. If you're willing to spend the money, and you can get the cherry picker and just get it out of the tree with a pole. And he's like, no, I don't know, whatever. And I'm just like, okay, dude, that's a lot of money just to leave hanging in the tree. Just, you're already you're giving up already. And he's like, well, I make enough money. Because then he's like, well, if it comes down, if it's broken, I can just buy a new part, this, that, and the other thing. And I go, well, really, that's easy to fix. And he's like, no, but it's broken. I go, yeah, dude, it broke off in such a way that would be a real easy to fix to find, because we found a couple of parts. And I said, oh, that'd be easy to glue back on. And he's like, oh, but I can buy a new part. I'm like, okay, if you want to spend the money to do that. So this guy's he was really, a rank novice when it comes to this stuff. So anyway, I could tell that my suggestions of all my examples that he just wasn't feeling it, and it wasn't going to happen that evening or whatever. So he was kind of just bowing out. So I said, give me your name and number. I'm going to see Doug tonight. I'll at least leave his number and name with him. So if the plane falls out of the tree, you might be able to get it back.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as we're walking to the car, he's like, "Oh man, I think it's supposed to rain tonight." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Won't that cause a fire?" And I go, "Huh?" He's like, "Yeah, I mean, light bulb batteries and water, won't that cause a fire?" And I go, "Well, if you crashed hard enough, either that thing would have sparked on fire already, so you didn't puncture the batteries or nothing." And I said, "Water doesn't hurt light bulb fires." And he goes, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, man, I've caused enough light bulb fires to know, that doesn't happen." And he goes, and then he kind of stopped and he looked at me. He goes, "You caused the light bulb fire?" And I go, "Yeah." I go, like I told you, you got to get over this embarrassment about being embarrassed. I said, because it happens to all of us. I don't care who you talk about. Everybody's got a story of something that they've done. It just happens. In fact, it gets even more frustrating when you have a lot of knowledge and then you do something really stupid because you weren't paying attention.
Yeah. That's even more embarrassing.
Yeah. So anyway, so he was sitting there, listening to me, and he's like, "Oh, okay." And so I started suggesting other planes that he could have bought, like a J3 Cub, high wing, trainer. If you want to get into fast things, getting into a wing, you can't see it. Like typical wings that we have, tough wings. And so I was telling him about those. Wings. I said, you can bounce them off of trees, put them at the fences. They're hard to break. And he's like, "Really?" And so I started talking to him. I said, "Have you ever heard of a thing called RC groups?" He's like, "No." And I go, "Well, you need to, look this RC groups thing up on your phone while we're talking." He does. And I said, "This thing is great." I said, "When I was up in Alaska and I didn't know anybody who did RC, I said, I learned a lot of stuff through a lot of guys. Or if I had a question about something, it was amazing. I'd write my question in and I'd get like 25 guys to come back and say, 'Hey, this is what you got to do.'" But anyway, to sum it up, because I've talked a little bit too long for this particular story. One of the things that, we were talking about, how he bought his jet and, how he saw it and everything. And I said, "Yeah, those guys some guys at the hobby store are not unscrupulous."
Yeah, unscrupulous is good. They want to sell you a product.
And so they'll sell you whatever. And he goes, "Well, to be honest, they tried to talk me out of it." And I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, they really didn't want to sell me the jet. But I
stick with that hobby store."
And I said, you need to patronize
Let's plug that hobby store.
Because those guys were pretty good if they tried to talk you out of it, because they could tell that you didn't have the experience to fly this thing." And I said, and the biggest thing I told him, I said, "Don't get disappointed. This is the worst part about this hobby. People are super excited to get into it. They're super excited to fly a jet, and it goes terribly, terribly wrong." And I said, you have resources. You have, the club president. He knows you by name. So if you come back to him in another week and tell him, "Hey, I'd like to fly with some people or fly with you guys," they'll gladly help you out. And it's a relief when you had, because he had some questions, because we started talking about his gyro. And I said, "Oh, is that what they recommended in the gyro, or, whatever. And he's like, "Yeah, I couldn't find anything. So I just put in some high numbers." Mm-hmm. And so basically he made the jet too stable. So he was able to turn to the left, okay. Right. But turning to the right, he had the gains turned up way too high. So it was not letting him turn. And that's why he was having a hard time turning around. That's my speculation on that. But it was kind of funny. So anyway, we kind of were saying our goodbyes. And as we were ending up, I turned to him and I said, "Well, it was good meeting you guys. Sorry it turned out like this." And I looked at his girlfriend and I said, "Hey, and she's a keeper." And he goes, "Huh?" And I said, "She's a keeper." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's Saturday evening, and she was out here for the past 3 hours flying with you, or, trying to see you fly your plane, when you should have had her out at some dinner, taking her out to dinner or on a date somewhere. And she was out here, and I didn't hear her complain one time. In fact, she was being more than helpful, because she would kind of repeat all the important things, that I would say or Mike would say. She would repeat it somewhere along the way, like for the time stuff. But she never complained. She never had a frown on her face. She never was rolling her eyes, or whatever I said. She sat here happily watching you enjoy your sport and not be successful at it. You know what I mean? And she wasn't complaining. I go, that's a rare woman right there. So,
That's
you got to
true.
hold on to
Very,
her.
very true.
Yeah.
So anyway, hopefully, he heeded my warning and, looked at her in a new light for, all the antics.
That or she
Jay,
broke up
Jay
with
the
him the next day.
matchmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So,
He's matchmaking.
because, when Mike and I were there, I'm sure she caught us eye roll. Like he would say something and we'd roll our eye. You can't help that stuff. You'd roll your eyes or, or whatever.
Yeah.
Or we'd say something, hey, you need to do this. And he'd be like, no, I don't have to do any of that. And we'd be like, making facial things. I think she was watching and catching all that stuff. So, yeah.
That's funny.
But anyway, hopefully he heeded up my warning and he's not giving up the hobby and he's going to attempt it again in a more controlled manner.
Well, we know that the club is pretty active out there, and hopefully Doug has gotten with him, and we'll have to hear the Doug after story if they were able to get it out of the tree and what happened after that.
Or get this guy on the show. He might be.
We could get him on the show and he could
tell
his real story.
Maybe his girlfriend would be a better guest.
His girlfriend would be a better guest.
Well, it's pretty funny. We were out the whole time and we introduced ourselves and like he never really introduced himself to us. Now he told us what his girlfriend's name was. Right. And that's so and so. And we're like, really? So he gave up your name, but he wouldn't tell us your name? He goes, well, you guys got a podcast. I'm sure you're going to talk about this. And I go, well, yeah, it's a good example of, what not to do.
Sure.
Or whatever. And I said, and he's just like, example. Well, I don't want to be embarrassed.
If it's any consolation, we're not dogging on the guy. It's happened to all of us, and if he is listening, or if his girlfriend looks us up and listens, and it's awesome. We wish him the best on it. It is troublesome, It is troublesome for some of us. I mean, we get that kind of I can do it. It comes easy to us, and
we all were he was at some point.
All
we
have
were,
been there.
and we've all come a long way, and we hope he does too, because that's what takes this hobby. If you give up over, I crashed a plane, I can't do this on my own. Well, it's not about your own. This is a group hobby. It's about camaraderie and friendship, and that's why we do this podcast. So
that's true.
If we can be an inspiration, hey, you're not going to start your own podcast. Well, that's us. No,
right.
But just. If you join the club, be part of the club, everyone's there to help you. And if they're not,
we're not laughing at him. We're laughing with him. So it's, it's one of those
commiserating with him, if anything.
Right. Because we've all done it.
Because we've all been there
too. I was trying
to
tell him because he was thinking like, not that you have a podcast. You must be, super extreme and never have any problems. And I'm just like,
that's half our show talking about our problems.
You listen to our podcast, you know about what antics that we get into.
Well, and here's something too, and I know we're running out of time here, but here's something as well is just because you flew smaller airplanes, and like in this particular case, jumping up to an EDF is a whole new deal. You could be the greatest pilot ever. Flying a small fun Cub, you could do really well with it. You could do all the tricks with it. And when you jump into EDFs, it's different. And AK Mike's a prime example of that. I'm going to use him because, he had flown a bunch of different airplanes, and now he flies the EDF for the first time, and he's really nervous, and he tries to come in. And of course, he's too fast. He tries to bang it on the ground, and, the gear collapses, and, we got to go fix it again. So it's no different. Every time you move to a new section of this hobby, you do it again. And flying turbines, same thing, right? Flying big, 33 percenters. First time I did that, I had tons of time. I was an instructor for the smaller park flyer stuff, and I flew this big airplane, and I was just like, oh man, this is different. It's different. And I didn't really crash it or have any major issues, but it is a different story, and it takes a little bit to get used to that. And then in the turbine world, you have to actually get instruction from that, and you have to get signed off for it and get a waiver and the whole deal. So, so every little bit part of this, it's a growing process, and some people jump a little bit quicker than others, and that's okay. So we're just kind of telling you, hey, if you're listening, keep up the good work. We want you to keep doing it. But it is advisable to go ahead and kind of solicit some help.
Well,
We do that.
one,
I do that even at
Yes.
my stage of the
Definitely.
game. I still solicit help.
so one of the things that when we were talking, and I was asking why he got this particular EDF, and he was talking about, well, it looked really cool and like F-22, it's the premier jet and fighter jet and this, that, and the other thing. And I said, yeah, I get it, the sexiness of the plane, the machismo from getting the jet and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were talking, and I was once again talking about going for him to go back to the beginning and fly, a high wing plane. And I was talking about the fun of flying, a Cub, because I figured, sometimes you talk to guys, I don't want to fly a high wing. That's, that's beneath me, whatever. And I started talking about the fun Cub and just why we would have fun with it and why it was a good plane to practice with, and then he was like, yeah, well, I'm thinking about getting a Tucano. And I go, why a Tucano? Oh, well, once again, it's a cool looking plane. It's low wing, da-da-da-da-da. And I go, yeah, okay. Yes, it is. I mean, it's a great plane, but once again, for your skill level, you might not want to get that. He's like, well, what about a P-51? I said, well, same thing. I said, what people fail to realize flying, RC planes is when you buy an F-22, when you buy a Mustang, a Tucano, you're buying a miniaturized version of the real plane.
Right.
And do you know what? Fighter planes are, real maneuverable and, and they do great as fighter planes is because they're unstable.
Right.
they tend to be unstable in certain planes. Yeah. And I said, so when you buy, if you buy an F-22 and you don't have a gyro in it,
right.
In certain attitudes and certain profiles, that plane becomes kind of unstable, kind of like an F-16. Sexy, quick, fast.
Right.
Yeah. And a lawn dart in the ground quicker than you can, you can imagine, because you're buying a smaller version of the real thing, and it has its aerodynamics and the traits of the original plane, and it'll do bad things. Right. So if you're trying to fly a plane whose nickname was the Widowmaker, let me tell you, if you don't have the experience behind yourself, you'll find out why the plane was called the Widowmaker.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we have gone over our time. Thank you very much for sticking with us. It was a great story there, Jay. No worries.
Our supersized episode.
Supersized.
I like that.
This is Jay's recovery. This is therapy, so he can.
First time off oxygen.
I know, right? So anyway,
so are we.
Yeah, no, right. We're out of O2 as well. Well, if you have a new airplane or you have a story for us, go ahead and email us at theparkflyerpodcast@gmail.com, and we can talk about it on the podcast. If you have any ideas for us, go ahead and give it to us. Look at that. Jay's building his little skipper there, so we'll have another episode on that when he finally gets it and ready to go. So yeah, it's looking good.
Yeah. Can't wait.
Nice. So,
shark teeth.
All righty. Don't forget to see us at the Jet Rally. And Michael from Arizona.
Jay recovering from surgery.
And Shannon G and Mesa AZ.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Let's fly.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.